I'm not sort of into conspiracy theories very much, but this is the biggest conspiracy. Single biggest conspiracy on earth. Don't feel, be afraid of your feelings. Be afraid. You can't handle them. You're never going to be able to handle them. Do whatever you can to avoid them. Single biggest problem on earth. Basically, the biggest problem on earth is humility. Yeah, that's why we don't know much truth yet. That's why we don't hear from God yet about many things. It's why we don't understand much about the spirit world. It's why we don't get life in terms of how God created it to be. Because fundamentally, we don't like humility. We don't want to feel, we would rather stay afraid and live in our fear instead. Biggest problem on earth, without a doubt. The big problem, because if I can't develop this spiritual quality of humility, I am very shut down to any other form of development. And it's going to be very, very difficult for me to change and grow and develop all the things that God wants me to do. It's going to be very hard for me to do without humility. Humility is the beginning, you could say, of change. But so what do I mean by that? What I mean is that we don't believe with all of our heart and have a desire to understand the truth about being humble. Right? We don't want to know the truth about being humble. The truth about being humble is it's going to lead you to all truth. It's going to eventually lead you to love. It's going to also create huge changes in your life because you'll be humble about making changes no matter what the results. Change. You follow? If you could boil all of humans' problems, all of humanity's problems down to one problem, that's the problem. There's no faith in God's truth about humility. Okay. Where was I? Johnny. Yep.
In regards to the priorities, priorities.
Just hold the mic. That's it.
Is it possible to define what is spiritual matters, or to summarize it?
Okay. Yes, very possible. So let's do that. Spiritual matters are always principles. Do you know what I mean by a principle?
Yep.
Yep. So if we look at principles, and this is very important to bear in mind for most of us, that principles to God are far more important than other things. Right? And the reason why I know that for certain is because God's laws are stricter when you break a principle than they are for any other thing. Right? So spiritual matters, let's look at spiritual matters, are principles based on love and truth. Right? That's what a principle is. Now, tomorrow morning, what we're going to do is mention some of those principles that and if you want to do a bit of homework tonight, if you're up to it, there's a 2016 assistance groups that can be downloaded from our website under if you go to downloads, and choose events in 2016, you'll find in there's a series of assistance groups that we did. And the very last two groups, which were done, I think, in November. October and November, or just November? I think
November.
November, I think, of that year. So those should be at the top of that list, because we list everything in reverse order that we do it. You'll see there's two groups that are called God's Loving Laws, right? And in the God's Loving Laws group, we mentioned principles that are based on three main areas. There were what we called fundamental principles, right, which are sort of the basis of how the entire universe sort of operates in terms of the laws governing the universe. And in amongst those, love and truth are two of those principles. But every one of God's laws has a connection with fundamental principles that are listed in that group. And then there was order-based principles, which to do with things like hierarchy, scope.
Things that enforce order in the world.
Yeah, things that enforce order, like governance and things like that. And then the last group of principles we called soul-based principles, which are principles specifically created that govern the human soul. Right? So God created principles like love and truth, for example, principles, they govern everything. Like you could say they're the fundamental building blocks or the fundamental structure of the universe. And then there's order-based principles which order the universe and keep everything orderly, which includes keeping your emotions orderly, keeping your sexual and physical life orderly and your spiritual life orderly. So these apply to all of these conditions. And then there's specifically principles that God created just because you are God's highest creation. And God needed some specific things that applied to his highest creation that didn't apply to anything else, that the other things don't have self-awareness and they don't have free will. And so God created a set of principles that guide the beings with free will and guide the beings with self-awareness, right? And those things are soul-based principles, and those lists of principles govern, which are all based around love and truth, they govern your entire spiritual life. And when I say your entire spiritual life, your entire life is governed by your spiritual life, right? So they all connect, all of these things here, we would classify them as spiritual principles, laws governing spiritual principles. And all of those things, and I think we, by the way, there are far more than what we listed. We only listed, I think, 13 total principles in amongst those groupings. And God has hundreds of them, but the 13 we listed are the most fundamental.
17.
Sorry?
17.
17, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. So the 17 we listed are the most fundamental in the sense that if you can get your life in harmony with those 17 principles, you're going to be in harmony pretty much with every single law God's ever created. Right? If you can get yourself in harmony with those principles. So I suggest that, as a bit of homework, have a look at that third group.
Now, you don't have time to watch all the videos.
No, not tonight.
It's a long time.
No.
But there are actually PDF handouts that we did for each talk that are well worth, they're things you can
download
quickly. Them. You can download them from the website, and there's good.
And just read through them. Yeah. And you won't be able to read through them all tonight, of course, because there's quite a lot. We did 30. Well, total, we did nearly 70 hours of video in just the discussion of those things. So obviously it's going to take you 70 hours if you're going to watch them. And if you're going to read them, it's going to take you quite a few hours, so maybe not tonight. But we recommend you do so because it will help you understand what the spiritual part of your life is. Yeah? Now, all spiritual parts of your life do affect the emotions and do affect the sexual and physical parts of your life. An example of that is one spiritual thing, which is a soul-based principle, is to do with how your soul works. And humility is actually to do with how your soul works. When you allow emotion to flow through your soul, then your soul works better than if you don't allow emotion to flow through your soul. So every time you lock down an emotion, you're actually disobeying a very fundamental spiritual law. You're breaking the law that governs the functioning of your soul. Right? Now, your soul requires that you feel and experience everything in order for it to pass through you. If you lock it down, if you suppress it, it won't pass through you and it will get stored in you instead. Right? Now, this is a very fundamental principle, spiritual principle about how the soul works. So when we teach that principle, people go, but yeah, I've got my emotions. And I go, yeah, the reason why you got your emotions is God created you to be an emotional being, to have these emotions pass through you. And the reason why you got the emotions is you didn't let them pass through you, or somebody else didn't let them pass through you when you were young. And most people go, but I got the emotion. I go, yeah, but this is, the principle is you got to let it pass through you. You got to go through the experience. And they go, but I don't want to go through the experience. I know it's going to be painful. And I go, too bad. You're going to have the experience. You're going to have to go through the experience, because if you're in harmony with the spiritual principle of how the soul functions, you will want to do it. You'll get to the stage where you want to do it, and it won't matter to you how painful it is, because you know that any pain that exists in your soul, if you experience it, will go and pass, and it will be gone. And once you believe that, you will start doing it. But you have to believe it in your feelings to do it. And once you believe it, you will do it. Now, most people on it don't believe it, and so they haven't done it. But it's a spiritual principle governing how the soul functions, right? And so that's an example of a spiritual principle solving a soul problem. But if you block an emotion in your soul, what happens, interestingly enough, is your two bodies, remember you're half of the soul. So, Johnny, you're a half of the soul and you've got your half of the soul, and you know your attraction is?
Women. Women?
Yes, so you know the other half of your soul is feminine, yes. Right? Now, if you block an emotion in your half of the soul, then something in your body is going to go wrong, because there's no energy now flowing through your body from the emotion being blocked in that soul in a certain area, will affect a certain area of your body. So let's say you block yourself to love. Well, what's going to start happening is you're going to start having heart problems. Right? In your physical body, they'll start developing heart problems. Firstly, the energy stops in the heart area of your spirit body. And then because there's a silver cord connecting the two bodies together, the heart in your physical body also gets affected by it. So if I solve the spiritual problem of allowing myself to love, and not holding on to my sadness about love, then I'm going to fix my heart in my physical body. So that's an example of how me understanding the spiritual problem is solving a physical issue. You see? Yeah. So a lot of us want to, when we get a physical problem, we go, I just want to fix it. Like, I got heart disease, as people say. I just want to fix it. What do I do to fix it? Solve the spiritual problem is the way to fix it. The spiritual problem is you're not allowing yourself to feel your sadness about love. That's the spiritual problem, right? You're sad about love. You have an emotion about love that's locking you up with a belief that's false about love. You think that if you block love, you're protecting yourself. That's a spiritual problem. It's not how the soul works. If you block love, you're blocking the flow of love through your soul. If you block the flow of love through your soul, you will even block self-love in your soul, and as a result, your heart will develop a problem and you'll die. Your physical body will eventually die from that problem just because of the spiritual problem that caused it. That makes sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So if I examine that and I think, right, these principles, these spiritual problems, and we define them as principles based on love and truth, right? If these spiritual problems can be resolved, I not only will resolve my spiritual problems, but I'll also resolve, which are all my beliefs and all the things I believe and think, and I'll be open to receiving truth from God, so I'll now know what to believe. Not only will all that be solved, but I'll now deal with some emotions and release some emotions that are in disharmony with with love and truth, right? In other words, I'll deal with all my sin. That'll be gone. And all my sexual and physical problems will just disappear if I do it, right? So can you see, if I focus on dealing with my spiritual problems first, it's the most economical in the long run to dealing with any problem. But most people go, forget about spiritual, forget about emotional, forget about sexual. I want all of those things happening the way they currently are. But I'm getting heart disease. Tell me how to fix it. And I'm going, well, this is how to fix it. You fix the spiritual problem. But I don't want to hear about the spiritual problem. I want to, you tell me what to do. So the doctor, when you go to the doctor, he tells you what to do. What does he tell you what to do, Phil? You're a doctor. Heart disease. What are you going to tell him what to do? Microphone. What are you going to tell him?
Well, it's usually medication, isn't it? Is what a doctor will tell you.
Right. So what kind of medication would they have to take?
Depends what sort of disease it is.
Let's say I had a blockage in the valves of my heart with fat deposits and other things. What would I do?
Well, you probably need to be on some aspirin.
Yeah. So thinning my blood.
Thinning blood, yeah.
Yeah. What else would I need to do if I had bad heart disease? I've got to change my diet, don't I? Would you recommend that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Dr. Phil?
Yep.
Sorry, I can't resist that every time. So he recommends that you would also change your diet and whatever else. So what is he doing? He's recommending physical solutions to a spiritual problem. How's that going to go? It's not going to work very well.
It gets worse and worse, Jesus.
It just gets worse and worse, doesn't it? And you know, and this is it's frustrating for doctors, is that they have all of this medication now and all of these prescriptions and all this medication, and usually by the time a person reaches my age or older, 60s and 70s, they've got on so many things that it's like a pot puree.
You can hear them rattling when they walk because all the pills in their tummy.
Yeah, basically. Well, they're rattling, carrying them all in their belt bag, with their days of the week on them, and yes, it's a problem. But because the focus is just fix me physically. You see, a doctor who is just responding to your demands to be fixed physically, without dealing with a spiritual problem. But if everybody understood, no, there's spiritual problems that cause emotional, that trigger all of these other problems, and we deal with these spiritual problems, we'll fix these other problems. If everybody understood that, you'd go to the doctor and you say, I've got heart disease, doc, and he'd say, okay, what we need to do is put you on a regime of opening your heart and dealing with all the reasons why you're sad about love and what's going on in your history. We have to send you to a psychiatrist that's going to help you examine what's gone on in your history to find out why you've locked yourself down with regard to your sadness about love and everything. And you imagine giving that advice. The average person would go, what the hell are you talking about? Like, why are you I just want to come here and give me a pill. Give me a pill. And as any doctor well knows, the average person just wants a pill because they don't want to deal with their spiritual problems. They don't want to deal with their emotional problems. Make sense? Okay. So where were we next? Over there we were. Yep.
Hello, thank you for being here. It's Philippa.
You've forgotten now.
It was a while ago.
It was a while ago.
It was a question that I also had last week, was around the UK specifically. What are the biggest emotional injuries here that you feel prevent progress?
The very single biggest is what I would call a conspiracy. Right? But it's not going to be, if you know me well, I'm not sort of into conspiracy theories very much. But this is the biggest conspiracy. Single biggest conspiracy on earth. Don't be afraid of your feelings. Be afraid. You can't handle them. You're never going to be able to handle them. Do whatever you can to avoid them. Single biggest problem on earth. Basically, the biggest problem on earth is humility. Yeah, that's why we don't know much truth yet. That's why we don't hear from God yet about many things. It's why we don't understand much about the spirit world. It's why we don't get life in terms of how God created it to be. Because fundamentally, we don't like humility. We don't want to feel, we would rather stay afraid and live in our fear instead. Biggest problem on earth, without a doubt. Of course, that particular problem begins by some other deeper spiritual problems, which is, I don't want to accept that God exists. I don't want to accept God's laws. It really begins there, doesn't it? But that's the big problem, because if I can't develop this spiritual quality of humility, I am very shut down to any other form of development. And it's going to be very, very difficult for me to change and grow and develop all the things that God wants me to do. It's going to be very hard for me to do without humility. Humility is the beginning, you could say, of change. But before humility, there's something you're going to need to have.
And actually, this is something that John mentioned for this group, isn't it? That's quite a block here. I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say.
Well, I don't know if you do, but we'll see. Because that's not what I think. But,
That's it's not what you're going to say.
The biggest block to humility, what do you reckon it might be? So, firstly, we don't have faith in truth about humility. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that we don't believe with all of our heart and have a desire to understand the truth about being humble. Right? We don't want to know the truth about being humble. The truth about being humble is it's going to lead you to all truth. It's going to eventually lead you to love. It's going to also create huge changes in your life, because you'll be humble about making changes no matter what the results. Right? So can you see, faith is a spiritual quality. Truth is a spiritual quality, because they're principles. And humility is a spiritual quality. This quality belongs to God. Is that not true? And this quality, humility, so truth belongs to God, only God, not yours. Humility belongs to you, me. It's up to me, and faith is up to me. So to solve that biggest problem, no one else, I am going to have to develop faith in God's truth about me being more humble. I'm going to have to develop faith, and I'm going to have to develop humility. And if I do that and ask God about what the truth is, I will change. You follow? If you could boil all of humanity's problems down to one problem, that's the problem. there's no faith in God's truth about humility. Lots of faith in arrogance, lots of faith in self-opinion, lots of faith in people who are arrogant, lots of faith in science. You know, like how many times I hear that science is going to solve the world's problems. And I'm going, how is that going to be the case when it's caused most of them in the first place? So, you know, there's faith in all these things that don't work, and yet we don't have any faith in humility, because humility requires me to feel something, doesn't it? It requires me to feel something. I won't be answering any more questions, by the way. Not today. Humility requires me to feel something. Without humility, I will not feel. Right? If I don't feel, I can't change. I can't have desires. I can't be happy. I can't be sad. I can't be happy. I can't feel joy. I can't feel, sorrow. I can't grow, because humility allows me to accept more truth, so I know where to grow. I can't do anything without it. I can't learn. I can't be a student. I can't understand anything, because humility lets me absorb new ideas. Right? Without humility, I can't absorb new ideas. So humility allows me to do a lot of things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do. But if I have no faith in it, none of those things are going to happen. Because faith is a desire for humility. Faith is what drives me to humility. Faith is saying, it's a good thing. Go there, it's a good thing. See, when it comes to feeling feelings, most people have faith that it's a bad thing. They've got a corrupt faith. It's bad. So this is God's truth, that humility is good, and I need to develop faith in that. That's what I need to do. If I do not do that, my progress will be only driven by compensation. In other words, you'll be beaten into submission by the law, because that's the law's job, is to cause you to have correction and reparation. That's the law's job. You're going to be beaten into submission by the law unless you do that. All right? Then you'll love the law if you do that. You won't need to be beaten in submission from it, because you're already doing it. Like, if you really love the law, can you see? If you really love the law and its results, can you see you won't need to be forced into doing them? You'll want to do them. But when we don't love the law, when we don't have faith in the truth about humility, we don't love the law, and what happens then? We're going to have to be pressured into doing them somehow, to following the law at some point. And that's the purpose of a lot of the first 5 spheres of the spirit world. They're all there to pressure people into, through the law, to force people eventually to become loving. That's why they're there. If we all had faith in the truth about humility, the first 5 spheres of the spirit world would no longer exist. And everybody who passed from earth would pass into the 6th sphere. Right? And that's something that I would love to see happen soon. Of course, it's going to happen in my lifetime.
It's a pretty long life.
Because I've got an eternal life, right? So sooner or later I'll see that happen, but it'd be nice sooner than later, because the average person from earth passes in such extreme pain and agony with regard to the amount of breaking of the law that's occurred, that it's completely unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. But because sin is a human creation, humans are going to have to deal with it. Because God didn't create sin, humans did. Right. So what are we going to talk about tomorrow? Well, what I'd like to do tomorrow is talk tomorrow we'll focus more on answering individual questions, but can you see the focus is not going to be on your feelings, is it? What we've got to do is answer your individual questions more based upon the principles surrounding the spiritual principle that needs to be learned. That makes sense to you? If you learn the spiritual principle in your heart, the emotional and sexual and physical problems you face will be solved. Right? So it's far better if we can focus on the spiritual side of this. We also would like to discuss a little more about some of the principles that govern the spiritual principles that govern your life. And that would require some of you asking some questions about that, because tomorrow I'm not going to talk very much. Well, it's probably not right for me to say that. I'm not going to talk very much except in response to your questions. Does that make sense? So tomorrow the goal is for you to feel about your questions that you want to ask, and we will relate them to spiritual principles. And in the goal, so that we can eventually see, like, where God's laws are being broken, so that we understand what we need to fix. That's the motivation of the discussion. If we can go in that direction, this will give you a feeling of power in your personal life over dealing with your problems. See, what I would like for each of you to feel is a deep confidence in humility, a deep confidence that you can deal with anything yourself, a deep confidence that all you've got to do is engage the principles and you will work through the problems emotionally and sexually and physically. You work through problems because you've engaged the spiritual principle. If we can grasp that by tomorrow evening and start to feel some of that in ourselves emotionally, then it's going to go a long way to solving many of the problems we face in our day-to-day life, right? Very important to focus on the principles. And the purpose of this is to bring us more into harmony with God's standard of love, so that we can see that every one of God's laws he created because he loves us. Not because he's trying to make our life difficult and hard, and not because he's trying to torture you. He's not trying to browbeat you for the rest of your life, but every law is there as an expression of his love for you. And when you begin to understand and grasp that, you realize every law is helping me to grow in my joy and happiness in my experience of life. Every law is for that purpose. So that's where we would like to go tomorrow. Sound all right with you? Yeah. So, of course, tomorrow we may also involve some spirit questions in our discussion, because obviously we want to help the spirits who are in attendance as much as we would like to help you. So, and sometimes you'll find that their questions will cause you to ponder about what you may face in your future as well. So we'll do that too. All right. Thanks, Dave. Now, every day we finish, Mary and I, obviously we've talked for 5 hours already. I've talked for 5 hours and Mary's talked for a bit less than that. But obviously by this stage we're needing a rest. And also we have a number of things we have to do with our system. We have to shut it all down and we have to get all the recordings, and then we take them home each night. And then I actually do some things with those recordings each night and put them up on some sites, so we've got a backup of them. And all of those things take a few hours every night to do. So just bear in mind that we're not going to be able to have many personal conversations with you during these days, because our energy is fixed on trying to have a group conversation with you. But I just would like to remind you of one thing. Any personal thing you would like to ask us has a principle involved. A good thing for you to try to start to do is start looking at what principles are involved with every personal thing you face. Okay? And we would like to recommend that tomorrow, when you ask your questions, we would like you to have given some thought to the principle involved that might be needing to be addressed because of that question. We want to help you to be able to help yourself more. We know that all of you, after we finish this group, will go home to your respective countries and your respective homes. And Mary and I are going to be on with it, talking to another group, and we're not going to be able to help you. We're not going to be able to talk to you when we're there. We're going to be talking to them. And it's physically impossible for any one person on earth even to help you with all of your problems. That's why God's given you a guide and a guardian to help you, to keep you alive, to help you function and to protect you. And God's given you your conscience so you ask God any question. You know, any person, including ourselves, we're limited. We're not going to be able to help you in every circumstance. So God can. And so this is why it's such an important thing that you focus more of attention on your relationship with God than your relationship with Mary and I. That makes sense? Yeah. And so what we would like you to do tomorrow with your questions is we would like you to ponder about the principle and also, if possible, attempt to ask God, through the operation of your conscience, attempt to ask God what God feels about it. Can you do that with your questions tomorrow? So you want to ask God what God feels about it, and also you want to try to understand what principles might be involved with your question. Follow? So that's what we would like you to do tomorrow. Because what we're trying to do is to get you to put some more personal effort into your own life. Okay, well, thanks for your time today, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. We'll be here, we'll start again at 11. Yep. And
yeah, and if
is there any other things we need to note before people go?
no, just if you could please make sure you take all of your personal possessions with you when you leave.
Particularly your mobile phones.
Your mobile phones, yep. And yeah, let us know if you had any issues with the parking and so on. And if you could just check the bathrooms, the toilets, that everything's kind of tidy as well.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
For those of you who are more involved with the hall, can I just remind you that the bathroom windows will need to be locked tonight as well, because some of them are open now. So we just need to make sure that they're all locked as well.
Yeah, people involved with the care of the hall, toilets clear, check for personal possessions, windows closed, everything locked. So,
yeah.
But Jay and I'll do a final check of that.
Yeah, we'll do a final check.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks guys. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, guys. Good job.
Let's do it.